Hello there, and welcome to another whiskey review, another whiskey comparison video with Drew Hanisch. And I was saying probably about, 6 months ago that I'm spending too much time on just focusing on Kentucky bourbon and Scotch whiskey, and I need to stretch myself and start dabbling in some different areas. And amazingly, I've done that. I went to Tennessee. I've learned all about Tennessee. I've been buying some Irish whiskeys that are not Jameson or Bushmills, but kind of working off some other Irish whiskeys to see what's out there. And most recently, I have been to Texas. And Texas is an interesting place because if you think about the climate in Texas, it is extreme. Extreme on the hot side, where Kentucky gets a balance of heat and cold and heat and cold, and Scotland has this really kind of mild temperature change. So you get those longer aged whiskeys from Scotland because there's less interaction with that barrel. It takes some time for it to slowly mature. Whereas when you go to Kentucky, it matures a bit faster. It depends on where you're stacking it in the warehouse. You get to Texas, it's hot. It's just hot. And you're going to get a lot of evaporation. And so whiskeys are going to age a lot faster. So it's been an education for me. I went to Balcones in Waco, Texas in March, right before the pandemic, and had a chance for Alex there to take me on a cruise through the distillery and show me everything that they're doing. And it was such an eye-opener. Very cool, because those guys use Forsyth pot stills. And if you don't know what those are, they are the pot stills. They're made in Speyside, Scotland. And Forsyth, actually, after Macallan came along and built their brand new facility, if you see pictures of the Macallan facility, there are so many pot stills in there that it's created a backlog now for Forsyth. And so if you're looking for a Forsyth pot still, whether you're in Scotland or you're here, you're going to be waiting for a while. So it's interesting because a newer distillery, Ironroot, which is up in Denison, Texas, they have pot stills too. However, because of what was going on with Forsyth, they went with Vendome, which is a Kentucky. If you go anywhere in Kentucky, you're going to see Vendome stills. And they hadn't made a pot still for a long time. So they actually went out to Denison, Texas, and they went and built on site this pot still up on feet, which I hadn't seen that. Of course, sometimes with pot stills, they're below the floor a little bit, so you don't always see the bottom of them. But I thought that was kind of a unique design, and then to see the Vendome nameplate on it was very unique. So I had a chance to go to both of these distilleries. I had a chance to taste at both of these distilleries. So I'm going to give you some of my own personal experience while doing a tasting of these two whiskeys. Now, when I tell you about these two whiskeys, you're going to say, why did you pair these two up? Because they are both basically corn whiskeys. There's a little bit of rye in this one, but this one's actually made up of multiple types of corn, and this one is made up of just blue corn. And if you know what blue corn is, it's also known as Hopi maize. It is a southwestern United States corn that is very drought resistant, and so it grows fine out there, and it's a sweeter corn, and it has a kind of nuttiness to it. So we'll see if that shows up when doing the tasting of the whiskey. Now, if we're talking about unique types of corn, and we jump over here to the Harbinger, this is Harbinger, I guess it's called Harbinger 115. I've seen it written that way, not sure if that's the official title for it because it doesn't say 115 on there, other than the fact that that's the proof. So the big difference between these two in terms of their makeup is that this is a 46% ABV versus a 115. So it's, not necessarily apples to apples when we're doing the tasting that way. But I paired these two up because they are probably two of the most known. Balcones was the up-and-comer who really kicked everything off, and Ironroot is the one that just won world's best whiskey craft distiller. And so both of these have had this upward trajectory, and so I thought they'd be interesting to pair against each other. Garrison Brothers Yellow Rose, Millam and Green was one that I tried actually recently. Still Austin, there's a ton of distilleries in Texas, and they only recently were able to get licenses to do so, and it's just like Tennessee, it's just blowing up, these craft distilleries right and left. And these guys, unlike Tennessee, have an extra piece that they have to pay attention to, which is the heat, and how are they going to deal with the heat. So let's jump into both of these. I paid, what did I pay for this? I paid $49 for this. I paid well, actually I didn't pay for this one. This was given to me by a good friend of mine that I have known almost my entire life, who lives in the Fort Worth area, and I went over to his house to hang out, and he said, I'm not a whiskey drinker, but somebody told me this was pretty good, so here. And we sat there, and I gotta tell you, easily, I think I've had about that much of it since I've gotten back. Easily, while I was sitting there that evening, I was just drinking this without any problem whatsoever. It was really, really a drinkable whiskey. So let's get into the tasting on these two and see what's going on with Blue Corn at 46 ABV. Now the aging on this, they age this for a short period of time on purpose. And we talk about the Walker scale. I actually brought my Johnny Walker Black with me. This is the ideal color for whiskey according to the Scots, who are trying to make a whiskey that is appealing to a world market. And you'll see that this is actually just a little lighter, and that this is a little bit darker, and most likely it's darker due to the higher ABV on it. Johnny Walker is 40 ABV, so just for a comparison. And so, you know, we'll say, I say a -1 on the scale. You can call it light amber, whatever you want to call it. Is wow, man. All right, so this right off the bat, that 1 year in the cask is enough for vanilla to just jump right out on this. And after my disappointment with Henry McKenna 10, I've been kind of looking for, and not all Henry McKenna 10, but just the bottle I bought was not a good bottle. I've been looking for that vanilla to just jump out, and this is the whiskey that does it. It's got a little bit of corn to it. It's got a little baking spice to it on the nose. And there's a little, like, oaky sawdust kind of a thing going on with it. This has a really nice mouthfeel to it. The corn comes out in the flavor a little bit more. That vanilla is always there. And actually, as it finishes out, the vanilla comes back and just kind of rests with you. It's not a full-bodied finish, but there's definitely something interesting going on after it fades away. I actually get a little raspberry in there, which I think is interesting. And you get this nice sort of coating of vanilla in your mouth. The corn is still there. I get like a little cornbread kind of thing going on. But what is really great about this whiskey is if you just want to sit around with it, I didn't put any water in it, just sit around with a glass like this and hang out with friends and drink a whiskey that is just really nice, this is definitely one to put on your list. All right, let's jump over to the Harbinger, and I'm going to tell you, I got a bottle of this from Alex before I left, and it was actually on release day. It is actually date stamped 3/9/20, and that was the day I was there. And this is a really interesting whiskey, and I will do a review on it. As you can see, over the last few months, I have put it in that bottle as well. So we'll talk about that one later on, sooner or later. Lots going on in Texas, and I'm sure there'll be more matchups and pairings that I can pull off. All right, let's jump over to Ironroot. Now, if you've listened to my podcast episode this week, then you have heard the story of T.V. Munson. T.V. Munson was the great man of Texas who had something to do with saving cognac. So, and Denison and Cognac are actually sister cities, which is interesting because Dwight David Eisenhower, president, was actually the guy who supported the foundation of the Sister City program in 1956. Little facts just flying your way. Now, one difference between these two, like I say, they use a Forsyth still, they use a Vendome still. These guys tilt the line arm at the top of the still down to get more of the oils into the whiskey, and it makes a big difference. I did a tasting of a triple distilled whiskey they did, and it still had a really nice mouthfeel to it. These guys have a fascinating still. It actually, once the line arm comes out, it goes into coils, condensers that are right above it in a swirl. I've never seen them coiled directly above the still. So very interesting setups there. Both great distilleries for you to tour. All right, so this one, definitely the don't breathe in quite as heavily on this one. That alcohol is burning my nose there just a little bit. It's not offensive. It's just that it is the fumes that get to you. It's not really the smell. This is 32 months that this is aged. And what I love about these guys, they're trying to incorporate some brandy traditions in, and they use a term called élevage. And what élevage means is basically it is trying to figure out how to work the casks to make the aging process work better. And so they're using different types of casks. They're using larger casks, larger than the 53-gallon bourbon casks that you normally see. They're working with a lot of European oak. And so it is, and second fill, and first fill and second fill casks also, which is something you hear in Scotch, that basically they're using a cask that's already been used, and that imparts sometimes some of the character of what was in that cask beforehand and doesn't over pound you with whatever. Had a nice long talk with Robert Lecarish of Ironroot. Man. So this one is made with purple, Bloody Butcher, Flint, and yellow dent corn, as well as a little bit of rye. So a lot of stuff going on in this one. On the nose, I get peanut, which I sometimes get when I smell a cask. There's a really nice baking spice. I want to say it's a cinnamon, baking cinnamon in there. And there's also and I couldn't put my finger on it. I kept wanting to say soy sauce or something like that. It's like an umami kind of a smell that comes in on it. I love this. Every time it gets in my mouth, I love it. It's not overly sweet. It's actually somewhere between sweet and dry. It's like right in the middle. I get some dark fruits in there, and I get like plum. That umami is still in there. Maybe a little saltiness in there. It's really interesting. And then the corn, as much corn as there is in here, it doesn't really hit you until the finish. And then with everything I've tasted Ironroot, at the end, there's a little bit of what I want to call a saccharine sweet, or almost like a NutraSweet. It's interesting. It just kind of hits the tip of your tongue, and you go, where did that come from? That's bizarre. But I've tasted multiple expressions from them, and it seems to be in all of them. What's cool about this, oh man, yeah, that baking spice is really, actually after you taste it, it becomes a lot more prevalent at the end. Man. All right, so it has a somewhat quick finish to it. But the thing is it just makes you want to drink. You just want to jump right back into it. This is really, really nice. Now there is a lower ABV version of this that's like 45%. So if you want to taste one that's, but man, the mouthfeel on this, everything about this is just primo. Like it. So keep an eye out for Ironroot. Ironroot was named after T.V. Munson's grapevine or grapefruit stock that he found that helped save cognac and the and that region's vines from phylloxera, which is what this week's episode is about. So check all that out. But I tell you what, I'm going to go on and continue enjoying this because this is really good. Like I say, both of these I would recommend. I think if you see them on your shelf, but for different purposes. This is a nice everyday drinker. And this one over here is one that you want to sit back, relax, and enjoy like a fine cognac. How about that? Yes, really, really nice whiskey. Cheers, santé, which is cheers in French, and slàinte mhath.